Hello there.
What? Where are you?
I'm
Oh,
here. Hello there. And welcome to Beer Blather 167. I was checking on our Twitter connection, but I'll get to that in a moment. In any case, good evening, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. And if anybody is offended by this binary definition, I don't give a crap. Uh, we're here for another 2 hours of Beer Blather. And I have a few things to say. Of course, this is Saul Montes-Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from still Florida. And right over there, Thomas Wictor from California, the only living expert in World War One flamethrowers, about to become an expert in a bunch of other uh, um, war material. And a couple of things that I need to do. We are starting, of course, in YouBoob as well, but we'll check out in about 10 minutes, as is customary, just to let our subscribers there that we're still alive. And I don't know how long we're going to do that, by the way. And I'm trying to see if I can do some of these directly on Twitter. Uh, Apparently, uh, it should be there. And
is there any way to check?
I've no idea. I've never done this. And we are live on Twitter
So
right now.
you go to the quadverum dot.
No. This is on my own, the one that they just reestablished.
Oh,
And if it works, I'll try to do it with Quadverum as well. But this is like a trial balloon. I wanted to see if it worked. If it does, hey, wonderful. And if it doesn't, tough crap. We've lived without it so far. So that said,
that
if
said,
anybody,
it may
if
not be
anybody,
available for
by
that
the
much
way,
longer, given the new Twitter CEO, whose
yeah, it's not going to last long, is it?
whose picture you put in the thumbnail.
That lovely gal over there
Right
with
up,
the
right
rabbit
above the word.
smile and the glasses.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, would you date that thing?
Well, regardless of that, I'm well, okay, since we're the great
Did you see I put her real boss on the other side of the
no.
right under Putina?
Oh, let's see, is that Klaus Schwab?
Yes, it is.
Schaub.
Schwab,
Schwab. Okay, yeah. Um,
Schwabian, yeah.
well, just so we're all on the same page. The Great Reset is the I guess, is it the spoken plan of the World Economic Forum? Who came up with
Well,
the term the Great Reset?
not really a plan, but they came up in the World Economic Forum's immediate many years ago was talking about the Great Reset and how we needed to kind of like deal again because
Yeah.
things are going to shit and we need a new order based on sustainability and equity and that kind of shit. And there is a small minority in the world that actually gives a shit about any of this stuff, both pro and con. For the most part, is glorious bullshit. But it expresses the inner fascistic desire of a bunch of assholes to control the economy and therefore you and me from the state.
Well, and people need to understand that the World Economic Forum has literally no authority to do anything.
There.
All they do is make recommendations. So when people talk about it, they talk about it. I mean, okay, Musk is under attack because is her name Gasparino?
No, close enough. Hold on. Now you got me confused. Uh,
Eno.
oh, God. Lisa something.
Yeah, so he's hired her as the CEO, and she's a board member of the World Economic Forum, which Musk has referred to as evil. And it turns out that Musk and his new CEO, they met on stage in April of this year, and this woman is supposedly a marketing expert. She worked for NBC. She helped NBC.
Yes, she did.
Do what exactly?
And Universal too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you ask me what she helped them with, I don't know because they're fucked.
Yeah, we'll see
but she's a marketing gal.
You're right. And what she told Musk is that the advertisers should have control over the content because that's the only way you can get advertisers in. And I just want to tell everybody, I used to work for a magazine called Bass Player, and the magazine was started by a former editor at a magazine called Guitar Player, which was the guitar playing Bible. And so he started Bass Player. It was a huge success. He left the position after a few years and gave it to the guy named Carl Coriat. And Carl was an even greater editor because he was not afraid to take chances, and he allowed his writers to interview great bassists from every walk of life. And then Carl was fired, and they brought in a guy who turned the magazine over to the advertisers. And so the magazine became an endless advertisement for musical instruments and amplifiers and things like that. And the advertisers said that the only people we could interview were those who would have who would give their endorsements to this or that brand, and the magazine collapsed. And so this so-called marketing expert, who's now the CEO of Twitter, she's following the same idea that you let the advertisers run the art and everything will be hunky-dory, and it won't be.
And it won't be because, and by the way, we know how advertisers always hit home runs with their choices for advertising. We can ask Budweiser about Mulvaney and see how those decisions work.
Yeah, and okay, here's something. I stopped drinking in 1991, but when people started reminding me, I started remembering some brilliant Bud Light marketing campaigns. There was one with three frogs, and they croaked Bud.
Oh, those were wonderful.
There was another where men would ask each other, "What's up? What's up?" And they did that in the 90s sometime, and then they did a like an update, and one of them was in Iraq, but it wasn't a political thing. It was just reality. A lot of our people are in Iraq. They did. It was a manly men confessing their love for each other in tears, and then the other person saying, "You're still not going to get my Bud Light. I love you, man. You're still not going to get my Bud Light." And then now they give us Dylan Mulvaney, and it's like, this is the great marketing brain who was taken off. She's on leave of absence, whatever that means.
Yes.
So this is
she can't come back when hell freezes over.
Yeah, and you said, okay, the Twitter CEO worked for Universal. Universal's in terrible trouble because they keep putting out these superhero movies that flop because they're ultra woke. And people are sick of them.
No, and the thing too is, the advertisers always had some pull.
Yeah, of course.
In early TV, when advertisers actually sponsored shows, and you have the General Motors Theater or whatever the crap, if the advertising executives did not like the script, they had to change it or lose it.
Right.
And they effectively enforced censorship on every single TV show for as long as the model worked. That
But
doesn't work in a public forum.
right, and also you could talk you could convince the advertisers that this wasn't going to be a bad idea, and they would listen. There are many cases where that was done in these early
Yes.
1950s TV shows. There were other times. Okay, a lot of the shows that are in syndication now, they had shows that ran once and then were never run again until they, appeared in. There was a famous Twilight Zone episode about a U.S. Marine Corps veteran who'd fought in the Pacific, who was taking out his craziness on a Japanese gardener paid by George Takei, and he had a samurai sword. The Marine did, and the samurai sword ended up possessing George Takei, and they had a fight to the death, and that ran once, and then it was just, the advertisers were all completely up in arms, so it didn't run again until it was found on a box set of DVDs, and then now you can see it again in syndication. But
Yep.
So you're right, advertisers did always have a say, but they could be talked out of certain things.
Yes. And the thing too is, if an advertiser doesn't like what I have to say, they're very well free not to place an ad on my feed. And as a matter of fact, we deal with that problem daily in the website Quod Verum. There is an article you wrote 3 years ago that keeps getting hit by advertisers because of war images, when in fact you put some TV newsreels of planes being shot down in Istanbul during the coup in 2016. There is no gore. You're never one to post anything that shows bloodshed or gore or any kind of cruelty. But apparently, there is always some imbecile who don't like it. And, for the time being, as long as they don't force me, I keep it there. But every 2 or 3 months, somebody complains and the advertisers squeal, and they may force me to take advertising off of that page, in which
See,
case I will.
okay, in the case of
But when you have something like Twitter, it's a more complex issue.
yeah,
Do they have to censor the entire platform to
that
satisfy one advertiser?
that's what the new CEO, is saying, because Elon Musk, in this public discussion they had in April, he said advertisers should concentrate on building their brand and leave the business side of Twitter to us. And she just plowed right past that as if he hadn't said a single word. And you can tell where this goes, where this
Yep.
is going. She's kind of a robot, and she clearly has no idea how to run a social media platform. And there personally, I don't think there should be absolute free speech. I tried Gab, and I was warned by people that as soon as I went on Gab, there were people planning to murder me out in the open. And when I spoke to the Gab owner, he said, "Well, just block them." And it's like, no, I think I'll just leave since you're not going to do anything.
Yeah. Well, remember when they tried to hook up with Quod Verum, and we ended up blocking their entire instance?
Yeah, because
it was like dealing with a zoo.
the quality of the discourse fell through the floor one night, and it
Yeah.
was like, who are these people? They were like drunk apes. I mean, it was shocking. It was just like, and
Torba was trying to give us lessons in free speech. The nincompoop.
No, but see, there's no the First Amendment isn't absolute. It is there. We have no absolute rights. There are limits on all our rights, and
And there are other limits that have nothing to do with speech, that have to do with decorum and civilized society. There are
Well, this
things
is
you
the
don't
thing.
do.
This is the thing. If people are going to be pigs just for the sake of being pigs and trying to deliberately shock people or whatever, they can go do that somewhere else.
Yeah,
It's there's a time, there's a place for everybody, and that particular place may not be, well, isn't for them because you
yeah,
know it's not fun to have a platform that's it's home to people who exist only to cause misery for others.
yes, yes. And that's why from the very beginning, uh, we stated and we live by it. Uh, those who would label words as violence do so for the sole purpose of justifying violence against words. Your ideas, your words, uh, do not affect us, and we take no action. There is no such thing as misgendering in a place like Wat Verum. You can call me anything you want. The question is, how do you do it? Do you start spewing messages to a particular target uh, with the sole purpose of causing anguish or
Or driving them away.
right? I mean, if you do that, you're out of here faster than you can say, "Oh shit." If you say, uh, oh, I don't know, just for an example, um, I'm I will not get vaccinated. I don't like vaccines. Fine. What is it to me? Do you have a problem with that?
Me? No, of course not.
No. If you start pestering everybody trying to push your anti-vaccine stance every 2 seconds, that's a different thing.
Or insulting them for getting vaccinated. You're an idiot.
Right.
You're a sheep. All that stuff.
Yeah. And people need to understand that that has nothing to do with free speech. It has to do with civilized behavior.
Yeah, and okay, there's something. It's a new phenomenon. It's called free speech auditors, and they videotape themselves harassing people until they get a reaction, and then they say, "See, you don't believe in free speech." Well,
Right.
Speaker's Corner in London is, I don't know if it even exists anymore, but it used to be. You could go there.
It used to be on Hyde Park Corner.
Yeah, so you could go there and you could get a little step to stand on, and you could talk about
Yep.
anything you wanted. And
As long as you weren't touching British soil.
exactly, and that's completely different from somebody who's following you on the street and insulting you and shoving
Yeah.
a camera in your face and all that. That's harassment, and that is not allowed. That's disturbing the peace, just all of that. If you're standing somewhere and let's say you decide you're going to insult everyone who walks past you without touching them, well, they can keep on walking and then they're gone. So your stupid insult
Yeah.
didn't do any harm. But if you're following someone and saying, "Oh, you haven't," I have the free speech right to do this. No, you don't have the right to harass people.
Yeah. It's like 5 years old. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. Do it one more time, and you're gonna meet my fist in
Yeah,
an
yeah,
intimately fashion. But that is infantilism at its worst.
yeah.
These people have the intellectual development of a 5-year-old and not too advanced at that.
Well, see, this is one of the reasons that the Great Reset is leading to the Great Collapse, is because it can't exist without infantilism. And if you infantilize the population, then it no longer functions. And um, you know, I suppose you could pass laws that make everybody, outlaw all cars, electric or otherwise. Outlaw all, if people vote for it, outlaw all private property, whatever. Just turned everybody into, you know, um, propertyless peasants. but you're still not going to get the ideal utopian society, because infantile, angry, hostile people are capable of anything.
Yep.
Like invading other countries and having their butts handed to them on silver platters.
Or annexing Crimea,
Annexing Crimea. I saw the most ridiculous thing. Okay, Kaliningrad is a part of Russia that does not touch Russia. It's between Poland.
Right between Lithuania and Poland in old Prussia.
Exactly. It's old Prussia. The Soviets took it after World War II, leveled it, and then...
they actually took it during World War II as part of the split of Europe between Hitler and Stalin.
Right. And
which is something that defenders of Russia ought to know.
Sure. And these people, okay, Kaliningrad used to have the I think the 3rd Arctic Brigade. I may have the numbers wrong. These guys were sent to Ukraine at the start of the war, and they were wiped out. The unit ceased to exist. Yeah. So currently, there are no real troops in Kaliningrad. So the locals are creating militias in preparation for the coming NATO invasion, which they claim will lead to their genocide. And
oh boy,
it shopkeepers, elementary school teachers, newspapermen, they're all playing army in trenches, and they think, I mean, how long would it take the Polish army to take Kaliningrad? About half an hour?
15 minutes.
Yeah.
But by the way, do you know why it's called Kaliningrad?
Yeah, it's named after somebody.
It's named after a general, Kalinin.
Yes.
Who executed 24,000 Polish prisoners when they took over.
Yes. And
so if they are fearful of the Poles, they have a reason to be.
Along those lines, at Putin's May 9th parade, he's always flanked by veterans of what the Russians refer to as the Great Patriotic War, and what we call, rightly so,
there are about 4 left now.
Yeah. This time, he had one guy who's a former member of the NKVD who committed mass war crimes in Ukraine against Ukrainian partisans fighting against the Soviets.
Yes.
And then on the other side, he had a former KGB operative who, what did he do? He did something else horrible towards Ukraine. And so these two crones Putin chose to sit beside him have both committed massive atrocities in Ukraine. And this was Putin's big middle finger to Ukraine, and Ukraine just kind of went, it's what we expect from it.
You know that in this big military parade, they had one tank.
One tank, and it was a World War II.
That was Ukraine big finger at
exactly.
Putin.
Today,
tank.
Today, the Ukrainians shot down 2 jets and a helicopter, and 2 helicopters. It's the greatest one-day loss of life of the Russian Air Force in its history since World War II. And they shot them down from within Russia. And nobody knows how they did it, because one of them was an Su-35 fighter, which is very hard to shoot.
Which is impossible to shoot down. You know that. It's impossible. It's impossible. It can fly everywhere. It can go every place. It's unstoppable. It's a gun.
Okay. It's very hard to shoot down with a shoulder-fired launcher. So they don't know. The helicopters you could take out with a shoulder-fired launcher.
Yes.
But the fighter bomber and the fighter escort, this unit was preparing to fire missiles at Ukrainian civilian targets, and they were all shot down. Excuse me. They were all shot down before they could do so, from within Russia. So that's how great the Russians are as a military power.
Well, you and I discussed this extensively for the past year. People who are watching us in Twitter now don't have any idea of what we have been saying since January. But everything we said has proven to be correct. How come the Russians have not had control of Ukrainian air for a single freaking day in a country with no air force? Because the Ukrainian Air Force at the beginning of the war was what, 5 MiG-21s?
Yeah, it was it was almost non-existent. Most of
It
their
was
planes
non-existent. So you're fighting against a country with no air force, with no anti-aircraft batteries, and you do not enjoy a single freaking hour of air superiority in a whole freaking year. That tells you how much the Russian Air Force is worth.
Yes, because the Russians do not believe in the doctrine of suppression of enemy air defenses, which is, you ask any NATO country, if you're ever going to war on foreign soil, the first thing you do before you send in any ground forces, before you send in anybody else, is you suppress enemy air defenses.
Soften the fuck out of it.
Yep. And so the Russians do not teach their pilots that skill. We have special missiles called high speed anti-radiation missiles that follow the beam of the anti-aircraft battery.
Yep. And take them out.
And take them out. And the pilots are known as wild weasels, and their job is to fly around until
and wait to be locked by an anti-aircraft battery,
by enemy radar. And what they do is they fire the way a lot of missiles work is that you have to guide them to the aircraft. So the older systems, they don't have fire and forget. So the position, the enemy radar position, anti-aircraft position is illuminated. You fire a missile and then you wait until you can visually see the missile coming up at you, and you dodge it at the last second.
Yep.
And it's crazy, but only the best pilots are wild weasels, and the Russians don't have the ability to learn that skill.
No, they have a lot of skills they don't know. Russia is probably the only naval power in the history of mankind that lost a naval war to a country with no ships.
Exactly.
And from the Moskva to I don't know, they're like 8 or 9 destroyers, frigates sitting at the bottom of the Black Sea. And the Black Sea Fleet, have you heard of them in the past 9 months?
No, because I think they're in port with
I think they're patrolling Bikini Bottom.
Well, they had them in port, and then the Ukrainians started sending these outrageously efficient drones.
Yes,
they're basically
the sea drones.
Ukrainians just unveiled their own indigenous tank. It's got a weird name. It's called something like the Ploto or something.
Yeah,
PLOTO. And for some reason, the Minister of Defense keeps driving tanks. I haven't looked him up. Maybe he's a former tank driver. I don't know. But he said that we need to start building our own stuff so we don't depend on other.
They just signed 3 contracts with Rheinmetall to build tanks in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Things are changing fast.
Yeah.
But it's you mentioned these sea drones. The Ukrainians managed to get a couple of sea drones into the port at Sevastopol and damaged a couple of Russian ships at port. And the Russians had no better idea than to mine the entrance to the port and put beams across the entrance to the port to stop the goddamn drones from damaging another ship, leaving their entire, what's left of the Black Sea Fleet buttonholed and at Sevastopol with no way out.
Yeah.
Now, what could possibly go wrong?
Ask the U.S. Navy about Pearl Harbor. That was aircraft, but what if the Ukrainians have enough of those British Storm Shadow missiles?
Yeah, they could do something, although I believe that the bridge from Crimea to mainland Russia is going to be the first target of the Storm Shadows.
They've actually,
That would be a game ender.
well, see, they've used them in Luhansk. They blew up a massive command center that the Russians said these were civilian apartments, and then you see like a literal Putin crony being led out with scuffs and contusions on his head, wearing his Russian army uniform. It's like, ignore that man. He is a civilian.
Ignore that man. Yeah. Twitter was abuzz today with all of NATO's ammunitions given to Ukraine blowing up with a single bomb. Now, I saw the explosion. It didn't look to me like that. Did you see it?
No.
No pity.
This is all of NATO's all of the ammunition that NATO has supplied to Ukraine, or
yes, that's what they said. I was laughing so hard. At one point, I thought I'd have to go to a hospital and get an oxygen tent.
It doesn't work that way. The countries are giving. Okay, Switzerland today, who has been resolutely opposed to giving any kind of offensive weaponry to Ukraine, has suddenly okayed sales to third-party European countries who can then give it to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so, but in the meantime, the Ukrainians are getting their ammunition from different sources, and they don't pile it up in one building. I mean, okay, for example,
it's spread all over the front. Come on, they're attacking from Zaporizhia to the Kharkiv region.
Yeah.
They're attacking all over the front line.
Exactly, the entire front line is under Ukrainian attack, and
yes, okay. and it's not the counteroffensive yet. They're prodding. They're trying to figure out where they have, and just like it happened a year ago, they prod. And in some instances, the Russians drop their weapons and run all the way to Vladivostok.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the videos, but more and more Russians. I saw a great video. I mean, nobody can accuse the Ukrainians of not being ferocious fighters, but there was a guy, a Russian soldier, walking on the road wearing his backpack, and this drone came down and it just hovered in front of him. And no, this is a different guy. So he just waved, and then he turned around and he went back in the other direction, and he turned around and looked, and then, went like that and just kept walking in the other direction. He didn't have a rifle, so they just let him go. Yep. But we've seen multiple troops. There are videos, I haven't seen them, of wounded Russians who realize nobody's coming for them. One of them put his own rifle under his chin with the results you could imagine, and the other put a hand grenade under his chin. So that's what these guys think about their own armed forces.
They're. I have the feeling. Before anybody out there, this is not an analysis. A proper analysis. No, I have a feeling that any point of that line is minutes away from collapse.
Yeah. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm. One of these prods is going to end up with a 20-mile retreat. I know that around Bakhmut, particularly the north.
That's already happening there.
It's already happened. They made 5-10 square kilometers. The Russians had to lose 50,000 soldiers to advance 10 city blocks?
Well, okay, today Prigozhin...
And now they're losing them in a day, twice as much.
Today, Prigozhin, the head of Wagner, announced that the fight for Bakhmut is pointless, but he's going to continue it until he can say that Wagner took Bakhmut. And in the meantime, the Ukrainians are surrounding Bakhmut. So,
how long do you think before they reach Solidar again?
well, this
Because
is
that advance in the north is come to within 7 miles of Solidar now.
what's happening is the Ukrainians are brilliant at information operations, meaning sending out disinformation, not misinformation, but disinformation. For example, they keep saying we're not going to start the counteroffensive yet. They've already started it, but they didn't. What people were expecting was this giant blitzkrieg wave of armored vehicles. That's not how it works. And as Zelensky said today, that kind of attack would cost us an incredible number of lives and a huge amount of equipment. So we're not going to do things that way. And like you said, they're probing, and where they find a weakness, they go in a little bit. They go in a little bit,
and they're going to surround. I don't call it the Wagner group anymore. I call it the Wanker group, because frankly, there's only one thing they're good at, and that ain't shooting. And the Wanker group is, for the first time since they got into this shit a year ago, in a position where they can be surrounded and literally annihilated.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is what's happening with Russia. Okay, I saw there's a Danish military intelligence officer who's got a YouTube channel. He's got a triple-barreled name. His middle name is Puck. I can never remember his name. He's really good. And he said that Putin has never been on the internet. He doesn't have a cell phone. And he relies 100% on his inner circle and Russian propaganda for his information. So this man is on another planet. And if they're withholding from him what's actually happening, he may not actually know that
He may actually think they are winning.
Well, exactly. That's what happened in Iraq, is that Saddam Hussein, well, okay, I heard many Arab writers say the Arab world believed Baghdad bombed. And when everything collapsed, it was a shock that we never got over. And Gaddafi was the same. Gaddafi was given happy talk.
The Argentine military in the Falklands War. If you listen to Argentine radio or TV, I wasn't there, but I got to research it later. And they were on the outskirts of London by now. They never understood the rapid collapse because they didn't get any valid information through the affair.
Yeah.
And the same thing is here. I think there is the immediacy of a collapse. That doesn't mean the end of the war. Russia still has a lot of material, still can do a lot of damage, but the front lines are held with spit and needles.
Well, they're building tank traps that didn't work when they were first designed in World War II.
And tank traps that a couple of grenades can open. The way. Did you see the caravans of people, civilians, in some cases ordered by the Russian mayors, leaving cities from the outskirts of Kherson to Mariupol to cities in Crimea, causing a traffic jam, as if they were, running ahead of a hurricane or something?
Yeah.
If that doesn't create panic and demoralization, I don't know what will.
Yeah. No, and okay, what gets me about these people, I read an amazing story years ago. When who was the first Kim in Korea? Kim Il Sung? Was he
Hold
the
on.
first Kim dictator?
Kim Kim Sung, Kim Jong Il, Kim Jong Un.
Okay.
That's the three Kims. Kim Il Sung was the first one.
Okay, so Kim Il Sung in 1968 launched an assassination attempt on the president of South Korea. And the men he chose were all officers from his special commando unit, and they trained for 3 years in a perfect mock up of the palace. And they knew their mission like clockwork, and they came across the border. And the only reason the mission failed was that they came across woodcutters. And rather than kill them, they tried to indoctrinate them. And the woodcutters said, "You're right. Communism is where everything's at. I am now a communist." And these North Korean killers were as innocent as babies, and they let them go. They said, "Now don't tell anyone." They said, "Oh, no, we won't." So of course they went right to the cops, and the cops called the army. And these guys managed to get to the president's house, which is called the Blue House. This fiasco is called the Blue House raid, and they were intercepted, and there was a running gun battle all the way back to the border of North Korea. And I don't remember the total number of commandos sent. It was a double digit. One survived and one surrendered. And when they examined this guy's gear, they found that he hadn't fired his gun once. Even when he was under fire himself, he hadn't thrown any of his hand grenades. And they asked him why. And he said, "Because when I came across the border, I realized instantly everything I'd been taught was a lie. They lied to me. And this was a great country. Everyone was happy. Everyone was smiling. And in my country, everybody's unhappy and afraid. And I just couldn't go through with it." So they interrogated him for a full year, and then they couldn't actually hold him on anything. So they released him, and he became a pastor and is still alive today. And he completely, he's a hero in South Korea, and he disavows that. He said, "I was coming here to kill you. I'm no hero, but how many Russians are there?" This is a North Korean, and he instantly changed the second he saw a different culture. How many Russians are there? The Russians, I've been astonished at the sheer implacable savagery of Russian troops, where they have, I mean, it seems that the whole bloody bunch of them are murdering primitive savages. There are a few outliers here and there, but the vast majority of them seem to want to kill Ukrainians, and
Yep. And they're convinced of that. By the way, before we keep going on this, I think we've been on YouBoob long enough.
Yes.
So for those of you in YouBoob, down in the description is the link to come and join us here. We look forward to it. In the meantime, bye-bye, YouBoob. And